I love visual garbage. I adore trash shows. Stuff that's just so dumb and campy, you are forced to turn your brain off if you have any hope of enjoying it. This is because, as any of my viewers will know, I tend to overthink some things. It's about time we talk about this cover. So there are precious few effective ways for me to turn my brain off by watching a show. I have found a way though, and it's not with reality TV, it's not with supernatural dramas, and it's not with TikTok brain rot. No hate to any of those camps, but my trash of choice happens to be Battle Royale. In both manga and anime form, the Battle Royale is something I hold near and dear to my heart because of how effectively it combines gratuitous violence with overwhelming angst. More general death game anime get close, but they don't quite have the same edge factor, you know? I love me some Danganronpa, but even ingesting it properly through VODs of Twitch streamers, it's simultaneously too big brain for me to veg out to, and too inconsistent for me to properly analyze. And that's one of the best examples of the death game genre. Squid Game is great, Tomodachi Game is neat, King's Game is a travesty, and none of them get the goopy goblin in my brain happy the way that Darwin's Game does. The tactics and mind games are all well and good, but what's the point if I can't watch the protagonist or his ladylove throw logic out the window to make infinite bullets? I'm sure a general death game can pull this off, Tomodachi Game actually gets kinda close a few times, but Battle Royales have this down to a science, and I love them for it. But when I decided to go rooting through the origins of the Battle Royale genre, I was pleasantly surprised. You see, the original novel written by Koshun Takami was far from the campy schlock I now associate the words Battle Royale with. I was expecting to find the source of every campy trope I'd memorized up until this point, and I did find those things. But I also found a fascinating story that had me ruminating on the nature of society and how it changes the people who live in it. And now that I sound like the type of guy who takes Battle Royale shows a little too seriously, I'd like to go insane with you all over the next, probably hour? About this little book, the adaptations of it, and how the hell we got one of the trashiest subgenres of action anime from one of the best books I have ever read. Hi BookTube, I'm Jordan Szymanski, and welcome to this retrospective on Battle Royale. Obviously, I'm going to talk about the book, so if reading a dystopian fiction about kids being forced to kill each other sounds like a good time to you, it's a good book. Go read it. But this is not a book review, this is a retrospective, which means I'm going to be talking about a lot more than just the book. There were 2 films released based on Battle Royale, the first being a rough adaptation of the novel, and the second doing something different. There's also a manga adaptation of both films, which is just one step of adaptation too far, but the first manga was actually in part written by Koshun Takami, the author of the first novel, which is a damn shame because it sucks. To put the quality level into perspective, I could have spent the same amount of time watching King's Game, and at least then I would have someone to talk to about it. There's also a slam book out that gives us a lot of useful details about Battle Royale, particularly about the time in which it released, which I'm gonna talk about a little before I go into the subject matter. It's a useful springboard because the content of Battle Royale isn't all that jarring or shocking to people reading it today, but it didn't come out today. Battle Royale came out at the turn of the century in '99, and while a lot of things were acceptable in fiction back then, kids being forced to kill each other wasn't necessarily at the top of that list, especially in Japan. The book was previously submitted to the 1997 Japan Horror Fiction Awards, one of the biggest literary competitions in the nation at the time. Winning these awards, or even just being in the running for them, meant huge success for an author's work, which made it a massive springboard for the book's popularity when it won the award. I'm totally kidding, it got shot down. While Battle Royale did impress the judges, the whole board agreed that it was a bit too intense to give an award to at the time. One of the judges said it was a parody of a popular TV show. Another judge was worried the competition itself would get slammed if Battle Royale won awards. My personal favorite was Miss Mariko Hayashi, who said, quote, "No matter how squarely it might be horror, or how interesting it might be, I'm not sure we should be writing stories like this." Amidst all of these rulings were general concerns that Battle Royale glorified child violence because of its graphic depictions therein. which are all stances that make perfect sense when you consider what happened mere months prior to this competition. On May 27th, 1997, the severed head of a developmentally challenged elementary-aged child was found in front of the gates of a junior high school with a note from the killer in his mouth. A month later, the killer was discovered to be a 14-year-old boy attending the junior high school where the head was found. This is severely deranged behavior coming from a child in late 90s Japan. If you've ever wondered why so many anime characters are brandishing box cutters like swords, that's because a box cutter is one of the most effective weapons you can get in Japan legally. Anything more dangerous than that is contraband, which limits the ability to commit violent assaults like this. This was a country that saw very little violence that wasn't self-inflicted, and it had just discovered an insane murderer who was in the throes of puberty. That's the Japan that Takami wrote Battle Royale in. The same year this assault happened, he submitted this book to the Horror Fiction Awards. With this context, I think we can understand why the judges on these boards were such fucking cowards. They all said Battle Royale was the best written book that year, but because it was bringing attention to the problem, they all got cold feet. Japan has had horrible emotional and physical conflicts in schools for decades, and while they don't usually end up in body counts immediately, I think the suicide rate speaks for itself. Kids can be ruthless. Battle Royale knows that and doesn't remotely try to glorify it. The kids who actively kill in this story are monsters, sometimes formed by the society that they're living in, and sometimes by tragic happenstance. I don't think even a kid could read what's in these pages and think, wow, I sure hope I grow up to be a mass murderer someday. Battle Royale wasn't about the epic fight scenes, although it definitely had them. It was about the social drama, the dread inherent in living in a society where stuff like this can happen. And mostly it was about the corrupt government that orchestrated it all. That's right, the first ever Battle Royale wasn't caused by a god or a criminal underground or a smartphone app. It was caused by a government. So yeah, this is a dystopian novel, which means it gets really dark. Fair warning and all that. Which I think leaves us ready to talk about the book and the movie, which I am going to talk about together because there's not a whole lot of difference between them. The adaptation was relatively faithful, or as faithful as it could be while keeping its screen time. There are some stark differences. The novel is set in a fictional nation called the Republic of Greater East Asia, whereas the film is set in a fictional version of Japan that has passed a separate criminal-related act specifically for juvenile delinquents. It doesn't really explain what kind of juvenile delinquent, it doesn't explain to what extent the crime rate of children has risen, but it does explain the program itself, and that's kind of all we need for the runtime of the film. In the fiction of the film, crime rates have risen to such an extent that schools are basically just chaos zones. So the government passes the Millennium Educational Reform Act, or the BR Act, basically as a punishment against unruly classes. The military brings a particularly bad class to a deserted island and says, "You want chaos? Go kill your classmates." It's dumb, but it's the campy sort of dumb that you can expect from the genre. I imagine this is the level of justification Mirai Nikki and its cohorts took inspiration from when they decided to rip Battle Royale off, rather than the dictionary definition, official speech by the nation's dictator, and the hammering in of the nation's oppression throughout every chapter of Battle Royale's novel. Program, Noun 4. A battle simulation program conducted by our nation's ground defense forces, instituted for security reasons. Officially known as Battle Experiment Number 68 Program. God damn it, Takami, you were one away. The first program was held in 1947. 53rd year junior high school classes are selected annually. Prior to 1950, 47 classes were selected to conduct the program for research purposes. Classmates in each class are forced to fight until one survivor is left. Results from this experiment, including the elapsed time, are entered as data. The final survivor of each class, the winner, is provided with a lifetime pension and a card autographed by the Great Dictator. In reaction to protests and agitation caused by extremists during the first year of its enactment, the 317th Great Dictator gave his famous April speech. This written definition, plus the April speech, which I'm not going to get into because it's kind of a bunch of waffle, both of them do a lot to immerse you in the setting through clinical tone. You can believe that it was someone's job to write all of that, but the written content is so ridiculous and unfathomable that you kind of want to unpack it all, which is just more immersion. It gets even more interesting when you look at how the actual Battle Royale is designed. To start with, everyone chosen for the Battle Royale is part of the same class, as I mentioned. This adds a whole lot of social drama and trauma to the characters that isn't present in any story that follows this. The film switches it up a little bit by having Shogo Kawada and Kazuo Kiriyama be transfer students specifically brought in for the Battle Royale, but in the novel, it's all one class. I'm sure there have been Battle Royales and death games that have used all characters from the same class the way Battle Royale has, but most often what I see is characters that happen to be in the same class as someone involved in a death game wind up getting involved by happenstance. They weren't personally picked out for the death game themselves, but they're close to somebody who's in it, so they end up being dragged in. This one keeps it exclusively to one class, which enables a lot of mind games and just makes for an interesting story. The characters have personal history with each other that comes to fore in every interaction. This part should be obvious, but there's also no supernatural element to this death game. Nearly every Battle Royale after this has a future diary or a special ability, but not in this one. No magic powers means no bullshit card to pull our protagonists out of the fire. These are normal kids given normal guns being forced to point them at each other. That never ends well. And then there's the logistics of this death game. The chosen class is sent off to an evacuated island that was evacuated specifically for the program. They are then fitted with explosive collars, given supplies and a random weapon, and sent out into the wild to hide and then kill each other. If any of them try to resist the soldiers forcing them into this conflict, their collar will explode. If they ever find themselves in a restricted zone designated by the proctor of the game as off-limits, their collar will explode. If a day passes without anyone dying, everyone's collars will explode. Every 6 hours, new restricted zones will be added to the map, so get out of there before that happens, or, you guessed it, your collar will explode. This is all pretty easy to understand. Most video games follow this format to the letter, though they always replace explosive collars with a red ring of death or an encroaching storm or something. But while those games, and even a lot of Battle Royale stories, will have extra weapons dotted around the map and other supplies ready for people to use, there's nothing like that for this game. All the players have is the items left behind by the residents of this island who were just evacuated. And there are some ways in the book that they get pretty creative using all that stuff. Some characters start with really bad weapons and exchange them for a butcher's knife or something that they find on the island. But for the most part, it's just their day bags and their weapons inside them. Going back to that closing ring format, though, while we can't track anyone's progress across the island through the film, the novel actually gives us an interesting little map somewhere in the front here. Here we go. I'll try to make sure to scan this in at a later date because I doubt that the camera can pick it up right now. But basically, through this map, we can track everyone's exact location. There are also a bunch of landmarks listed in, and some of those landmarks actually factor into which zones get taken off the map. There's not really a rhyme or reason to which zones get taken out first, besides taking away specific landmarks or vantage points, and obviously not closing off 2 remaining players from each other by making like a line across the island or whatever. The only rule is 2 students have to be able to meet up somewhere and kill each other. And that's interesting because the closing ring format exists to push players into each other to create conflict. But there's not really anything like that for the original Battle Royale structure. Restricted zones are kind of picked willy-nilly, and they scatter everybody accordingly. But combat obviously ensues because the kids have to kill each other in order to survive. I like this version a lot more because it creates a lot of chaos, and honestly it feels more immersive. It really feels like it's somebody's job to pick out these restricted zones every hour. But it's a job they don't care about too much, you know? Like, they do the stuff that's obviously going to make it harder for kids to rebel, taking out those vantage points, removing the clinic early on because that will get rid of medical supplies, which the kids will need if they get shot, which just makes the game go by faster. But besides that, it's got this vibe of, oh shit, I need to pick a zone for this hour. How about G3? Why not? Rather than starting at random locations around the map and moving inward, as in most video games, all of the players start at the exact same location, the school in the center of the island, and they have to move out from the center and hide somewhere for a little bit before seeking out people to fight. Which is obviously just one strategy. There's a lot of different ways to play this sort of game. Hunger Games is probably the closest to the way this one functions, but that one has a bunch of weapons and stuff set in the center, so that the center at the start of the game becomes a massive killing ground, which is itself pretty interesting. In this situation, though, all of the kids get sent out one at a time. There's no haphazard bloodshed at the beginning of the game, unless somebody decides to spawn camp, which actually does happen. There are layers upon layers to how this game is thought out by both the proctors of it and the players of it, who I'm going to spend the rest of this segment talking about because of the 42 students in this book, nearly 40 of them are interesting character studies. I cannot express enough how rare this is for the genre. Most Battle Royale shows have at least a few throwaway characters that barely matter to the overall plot. Some of them have good ways to offset that. Darwin's game, for example, gives even its throwaway characters interesting designs and powers, but those are band-aid solutions to the problem of having throwaway characters in the first place. The novel just didn't do that, which makes me feel genuinely sad about the characters that died early on, because I'm sure that Takami would have made them interesting. I used a digital dice roller to randomize which characters I was going to talk about for this segment, and I shit you not, I rolled a natural 20. God, I wish I had this luck on game night. I skipped over male and female students number 15 because they're the main characters of the story, so it feels like cheating to include them in the randomization, which means a nat 20 leaves us with Kazuhiko Yamamoto and Yoshimi Yahagi, which really is a nat 20 situation because both of these characters are involved in romantic subplots, which means I need to talk about 2 more characters to properly discuss them. Kazuhiko Yamamoto and Sakura Ogawa are a fairly secluded couple. They didn't avoid other people before the start of the game, but they didn't actively engage with them either. They're in love, they have each other. They're in that honeymoon phase where they don't really want or need anyone else. So when they're brought in for the Battle Royale, they don't even remotely consider hurting each other. Or anyone else for that matter. They just want to stay together for their final moments, so they look for a secluded cliff to do just that. It is on this cliffside that the two reminisce about their relationship and talk about the things that they wish they could have done together, the things they wish they could have seen, but also how happy they are that they get to spend these last moments together. When they hear a rustle in the bushes behind them, they both immediately leap off the cliff to their deaths, without knowing that the person behind them was a friendly looking to give them somewhere to rest and recuperate. The two of them are so determined to not give in to the structure of this game that they offer themselves up as sacrifices. Neither of them was willing to die before the other, so they didn't want to risk anyone coming by being a person who plays the game and killing one of them first. They would rather die together than try to live and risk being separated. Conversely, Yoshimi Yahagi believes herself to be in a similar relationship with Yoji Kuramoto. She was once part of Mitsuko Soma's gang, which means she got coerced into prostitution and a few other crimes by them, but she's cut ties with all of that, at great risk to herself, all so she can be with Yoji and stay faithful to him. And she's lucky enough to find her partner during the Battle Royale, but something's off with Yoji. Not to her, to us, the readers. We've seen enough treachery at this point in the book that we can notice the stilted words he uses. We can recognize the smile he gives her as false, and we see the strangeness in him immediately asking to borrow her weapon. Once he has it, he immediately turns it on her, accuses her of lying to him, cheating on him, says all kinds of awful shit to her, and threatens to kill her. All while Yoshimi cries, tries to explain, begs for him to stop. Until she doesn't anymore. Thank you, Yoji. I was so happy being with you. Yoshimi, realizing that Yoji lied about loving her, still recognizes the hope that lie gave her miserable life. The memories they shared were some of the happiest moments that she ever lived. And regardless of whether they were true or not, they're memories she can take to the grave. She tells Yoji to shoot her, says it's okay. And Yoji pulls the gun away, his eyes full of remorse and self-reproach. There is so much in this interaction, so many possibilities that could exist between these two characters. Maybe they really could grow to understand each other. Maybe Yoji could have a chance to apologize and really show Yoshimi that he cares, if it wasn't ripped away from him by Mitsuko Soma, who had been hidden behind a tree watching the interaction, waiting for Yoji to kill Yoshimi, so that it would be easier for her to kill Yoji. But, of course, that wasn't going to happen, so Mitsuko took her last opportunity and kills both of them. One last apology before the curtain call. These are the kinds of stories the novel is littered with. Touching and heartbreaking interactions between lovers, yes, but also best friends, hated rivals, and even complete strangers. You have the long-spanning B-plots between Shinji Mimura and Hiroki Sugimura, the abrupt massacres at the beach point and the lighthouse, and the self-contained characters that aren't involved in any of those things, all taking place alongside the main character's endeavors to fully escape this game. It's great. It's one of the best uses of an omniscient narrator I've ever read. But I do want to talk about a few things with the book that I don't like. Noriko Nakagawa, female student number 15, is basically a person-shaped MacGuffin for Shuya Nanahara, male student number 15. There is exactly one thing she does that affects the plot, and it's treated by the narrative as a mistake, despite it being an axiomatic good thing to do. The book has trouble deciding when and how people actually have agency. The game begins with the proctor telling the boys not to underestimate the girls because it was a girl who won the last game. Yet there is only one female in this entire game that is a strong contender to win. And even she does it by using her body as a weapon, which is a valid tactic, but it contributes to the greater problem of women's objectification in media in general, and especially anime. This book does not pass the Bechdel test, regardless of the writer's intentions and what good points it makes about how women are treated in a society. It's not a great look. And yeah, it was the late 90s, but if I let this stuff fly under the radar, I'm doing the work a disservice. Every time a woman in this book is under threat, besides one example, it is indirectly or directly because of a man. Every conversation between two women in this book at some point brings up a man. And there are a lot of times that both of those things happen, particularly in regards to the aforementioned Shuya Nanahara. He is a little better than the average Battle Royale protagonist, but only a little. The anime that turned this book and film into their own subgenre tend to include a main character that is just a generic dude with little to no talent or interesting personality traits. And of course, a staunch moralist who refuses to participate in the death game. Shuya fits into that last category, but he actually does have his own personality in there. He was the star shortstop of his baseball team in middle school, which allows him to pull off some crazy stunts, like chucking a dude's crossbow bolt at his head so hard and so fast it actually does knock him out. Is that ridiculous and stupid? Absolutely. Is it also kinda fucking rad? Yeah, it kinda is. The guy gave up on baseball, though, to focus on learning guitar and making rock music, which already makes him cool as fuck in the 90s. This all helps to prop him up as somebody you could see a lot of girls being into. Baseball skills are one thing, but somebody who can actually play guitar? Yeah, I could see a lot of girls falling for that guy. But even with that justification, it gets a little grating when he is brought up by literally every girl that doesn't already have someone they like. Every young woman in this novel needs to be crushing on somebody, and when Takami didn't know who to have this particular girl wish that she could say goodbye to one last time, he defaults to Shuya Nanahara. It's blatant and jarring, and I don't really like it. But I fucking hate the way the book treats the LGBTQIA+. Even for the time, this was fucking ridiculous. From casually dropping slurs out of mouths of characters we're supposed to respect, to separating the word queer into its own paragraph as if it's some kind of huge, shocking reveal. The character that one-word paragraph relates to is male student number 14, Sho Tsukioka, and he is portrayed exactly the way the Hays Code would have loved. He's cowardly and conniving, but also foolish enough to be the only character that dies as a result of not escaping a restricted zone in time. In the same chapter, he was introduced, no less. Though to be fair, he was tracking Kazuo Kiriyama at the time, who is himself an extremely poor representation of people who have suffered brain trauma. He experienced an injury in the womb that left him completely unable to feel emotion, which obviously makes him the perfect killer, right? You already know that people with legitimate brain trauma and issues chemically or physically with the way that they think have been getting terrible representation in media for decades. I know that that's kind of a given when we're talking about a dated story like this, but it's still important to make sure we're all on the same page. Which is where I initially had a transition to where I would talk about literally every character in the novel, because I fucking love like 90% of them, and I really want to gush. But that gushing would make an already long project take about an hour or two longer than it needs to, So I'm gonna slide that over to my Patreon, where I have other ranty videos like that already waiting for you, including a video about all the meals I missed in my Invincible Season 1 food video. Please stop asking me for Season 3, I'm not gonna- Shoko Kawada is a hard-boiled mentor sort of character you sometimes see in a Battle Royale. This character will usually take a bunch of lesser experienced people under his wing to gust them up and get ready for a real fight in the Battle Royale, which tends to make them one of the biggest contenders to win. These guys almost always have a heart of gold somewhere in there, but they're not afraid to get their hands dirty if it means saving the people they care about. Kazuo Kiryama is less of a character than a personification of death, which doesn't really lend itself to interesting character qualities, but his addition to the story did inspire a lot of other super badass characters in future Battle Royales. And those other characters are significantly more interesting than him, but the space between Kazuo Kiryama and interesting character is so vast that these characters still wind up living about 30 miles away from being actually interesting. Every character themed after Kazuo Kiryama is an evil psychopath that either loves or hates the main character. And unfortunately, whether or not they love or hate the main character is usually determined by what gender they are. Is it a guy psychotic killer? He hates the main character. Is it a girl psychotic killer? She loves the main character, even if the main character is also a girl, which, yes, has happened sometimes. The lady psychotic killer can take some traits from Mitsuko Soma at times, but usually that slot is reserved for a different character that's trying to steal the main character from her. And just to be clear, both of the women in this scenario are usually psychotic killers. And all of this is a fucking travesty, because while Kazuo Kiryama may be bland as unsweetened oatmeal, the tragedy he brings to the story is palpable enough to retroactively make him kind of fascinating. Sometimes he causes supposed karmic downfalls, but a lot of the time it's just straight up tragedy, and he doesn't feel a thing. That's pretty much always going to be an interesting reaction from a villain to me. When the villain just has complete indifference to the shit he's doing, it tends to get my heart and brain working overtime. Plus, Kiryama makes a good vehicle for Takami's actually decent understanding of gunplay and tactics. He exists in service to other parts of the narrative, and he is phenomenally written when it comes to enacting those parts. Mitsuko Soma, on the other hand, is to this day one of the best representations of sexual assault victims in media I've ever read. I was so ready for the source of this genre's seductresses to be a horrible misrepresentation, but as it turns out, Takami did his fucking research! Soma uses tools she's honed for years to become the second best killer in this game after Kiryama, who again, isn't really a character. These tools do include her body. Of course, she grew up in a society where using your body to get ahead in life was normal. Once again, this is a dystopian novel, which means the author has things it wants to say about the society he lives in. Takami saw what he believed were the worst parts of Japan and put them in this world. And of those things, pedophilia was clearly a huge priority for him. If it wasn't, Soma either would have been terribly represented, or just wouldn't have been included. Every deception she pulls is expertly thought out. Kindness, embarrassment, discomfort, fear. She acts with all of these emotions to just the right extent to get exactly the reaction she wants out of the people she's talking to. And the only people who see through those deceptions are the ones who already know she's gonna try to pull them. Which doesn't even cover the number of times she sneaks up on duels taking place, waiting for one person to kill the other so she has an easier time getting them while they're worn out. Which is exactly the strategy you want a character like this to pull. A manipulative person who has been manipulated before and understands how it feels and how it works? Yeah, of course she's gonna avoid doing things herself. Doing things yourself is risky. She's not just experienced, she's intelligent. And she's far more than just a broken child. Even when she denies people the right to save her in lieu of saving herself, she still understands the kindness buried in that misogynistic view. She appreciates these people, even as she slaughters them. She's not a good person, but she's her own person. And that makes her the most interesting person in the novel. It also makes me mad that there aren't more women like her in the genre, but some writers look at gold and see pyrite and then go on to make gold-painted rocks. We get a few more characters that you could count as tropes, the smooth talker, the martial arts master, the pathetic guy, but thankfully most of the characters in the novel are detailed enough that they don't feel like tropes at all. The plot events, however, were definitely mined for inspiration. BRs love to include the main character killing somebody by accident or not really understanding that they're in a death game when they make their first kill. There's usually a decent number of crazy people who either can't handle the stress of the game or were crazy before it happened. Sometimes there's a bloodbath scenario with a memorable location, such as the lighthouse incident, the cliffside backstab, the high-rise invasion, which is just the name of another pseudo-battle royale. And who could forget the fuck it, let's kill 'em all moment. The part of the show where the main character gets so aggravated trying to beat the death game without actually killing anyone that he throws absolutist morality out the window and starts killing people. And suddenly, he's really good at it. Shuya Nanahara has to shoot up a boat full of military men at the end of this novel so that he and his friends can escape, and he does it without so much as a scratch landing. This is the moment I wait for with bated breath in every battle royale, because it is simultaneously the dumbest thing you can ever write, and also one of the coolest things you can ever write. It's that time to stop holding back moment of any anime, but in this case, they weren't holding back because they just wanted to, or to get some kind of jump on the bad guy. They were holding back because they just didn't want to hurt anyone. Which is a moral stance that I think just about anybody can identify with, or at least understand. The biggest problem most battle royales fight with this is waiting too long for the main character to actually start trying. Because if it takes too much death and destruction for them to finally give up on trying to save everybody, then we're pretty frustrated by the time it happens, so we definitely don't get the "oh, that's awesome" reaction that is intended. We usually wind up with the "oh, fuck, finally, just kill them already and be done with it." But when it's done right, this is easily the most badass thing I've ever seen. Those are the most relevant bits of Battle Royale's novel to the origin of the genre, as far as I can tell. Even with the spoilers that I've given, I really do recommend you pick up this novel for yourself, because it's just a really good book. I don't recommend the audiobook. I find it's kind of a terrible recording. The reading is just not done well. It's very monotone and uninteresting. I wish I could say the film is a reasonable substitute for the novel, but unfortunately there's a reason that I stopped bringing it up a while ago. There's really not much to talk about with it. The film absolutely exploded in popularity when it came out, but that was because of the shock value, not necessarily because it had a good narrative. It still has a decent one, it is based on the novel, but it doesn't have the same punch, I think. And the shittiest part is, there's not really a way to fix that without either adding like an hour or two to the film's runtime, and it's already pretty long, or just making it a unique story on the same premise. Most of Battle Royale's interesting parts happen between the bits where the kids die, and there's a lot of kids in this story. Each of them have histories, families, lives outside of this game that we need to understand before we can properly mourn them. The film just doesn't have the time to give every death its due. In fact, it has to cut a fair few of them just to fit in enough time for the deaths that are more impactful overall. Yoshimi Yahagi and Yoji Kuramoto are two of those off-screen deaths, and that sucks. Especially because even with those deaths being cut, there's still not enough time in the film for us to really have a reason to care about our main characters. In the novel, Shuya is a Rage Against the Machine fan who didn't really understand the horrors his nation was committing until he became part of them. Noriko Nakagawa is a forgettable love-struck sweet girl, and Shogo Kawada is a hardened veteran who's been through one of these games before. His story remains unchanged in the film, but Shuya and Noriko get some odd changes that I don't really understand. In the novel, Shuya's parents died in a car crash, so he got to the orphanage pretty young and was basically just raised there like most of his life. In the film, Shuya's father committed suicide late into his childhood using ribbons that read, "You can do it, Shuya," to hang himself. I'm not entirely sure what that's supposed to tell us about the character, but if they were going for shock value, it worked. And Noriko's changes are minimal, but weird. She has this dream halfway through our runtime that the film acknowledges as being canonically a shared experience between herself and the proctor of the game itself, who in this version is actually one of their old teachers that Nobu stabbed one time. Oh shit, I forgot about Nobu. He's Shuya's best friend. They grew up in the orphanage together, they're tight as tight can be. In the film, he's kind of an asshole given that he stabbed a guy, but otherwise they're still good friends. Which, yes, is a little jarring and weird. I really wish the film had enough time to connect the dots for us. He does have some anger issues in the novel. They don't blow up often, but when they blow up, they blow up. So I assume him stabbing their teacher was meant to be a nod at those anger issues. Shuya, Noriko, and Nobu are foreshadowed as this love triangle at the start of the story before the Battle Royale starts. Noriko likes Shuya, Nobu likes Noriko, and Shuya doesn't seem to like anyone? It'd be an interesting slice of life situation in any other story. So anyway, back to the film. In the dream that Noriko's having, she's eating ice cream with that teacher and walking alongside a brook or a river or something. After a bit of walking, she turns around and says something that we can't hear. I think we're supposed to read her lips, but I don't speak Japanese. And then he says something back to her in the same way. Again, no audio, so we have no idea what's going on. When the teacher wakes up, he reaches for these cookies that Noriko baked for Shuya and Nobu before the game started. Cookies that he took off Nobu's corpse after he killed him, by the way. And yeah, he's just munching on these cookies after having a dream about a high school girl. Which, yes, Noriko does acknowledge in the film as something she believes was a shared experience between them. She even tries to use it to puzzle out the proctor. And I hate to say it, but I think the puzzle's been solved. I didn't actually mean to have the dream playing on screen in this part where it happened, but, lucky me, I guess. I can't remember for the life of me where I found this cut, but there's an extended cut of the film out there that seems to imply that Noriko and this teacher may have been a thing? I hope I'm misremembering that. I really hope that's not what happens. But I recall a post-credit scene where the teacher and Noriko are having a conversation that we can actually hear, and it doesn't sound great. This is not a part of the novel. It doesn't have any reason to be here, but it's here anyway. I think they were trying to humanize the teacher a bit more, but brother, you already humanized him. You humanized him a lot better than the one in the book. The teacher in the novel was never one of their teachers. He's some stranger that shows up to run the program and that's it. He's a complete asshole that raped the main character's surrogate mother. That's how Nobu dies, by the way. He finds out about this and charges the proctor of the game, and he gets killed for it. He's shot in the eye. He's dead. Might have been his mouth. Somewhere in the face. Whereas in the film, the teacher gets calls from his daughter who seems to hate him. It seems like he's being suspected of infidelity or something more horrifying, which he's definitely doing the more horrifying bit, but it's causing a strain in his familial relationship, which is something that a lot of people can identify with, including me. Before this dream, I thought that he was eating the cookies because they reminded him of his daughter, Or maybe because he never got cookies like this from his daughter or even his wife. And shit, we saw him get stabbed early on in the film. That has to bring your heart out to this guy a little bit. I honestly think he's one of the most interesting characters in this film if you cut the weird shit with Noriko out of it. Just let her be uninteresting or, I don't know, give her anything else if you want to branch her out. Let her have a conversation with a girl that's not about a guy for a change. That would be monumental. It's theoretically possible that this inclusion to the plot helped to influence a lot of the creepier shit that goes on with children in Battle Royales, but that might be a stretch. This is an issue that pervades all of anime to one extent or another, so I'm cool with capping it there. Fundamentally, the Battle Royale novel is an amazingly convoluted mess of some of the best characters and worst characters I've ever read in my life. Whereas the film is still decent action viewing, if that's what you're here for, it's very well done cinematography speaking. Especially the lighting. Some of the flashback scenes are so warm, while all of the darker, grim scenes are super crisp, you could bite into this shit. But if you're looking for a solid narrative, I would probably pick a different film. And both need to be acknowledged for the massive strides they made in their respective mediums. Read the book for a good story, watch the film for good fight scenes. Just for the love of God, don't read the manga. I don't know what possessed Akami to make such massive changes to the story when adapting it to manga form, but I hope to God that shit was exercised because this is terrible. Like, if I could legally burn every copy of this manga, I would have a new purpose in life. The manga adaptation changes bits and pieces of every character's story and backstory, and when it makes a change, it is always for the worse. Here are a few of my least favorite portions to give you a basic idea. As previously mentioned, Yoshitoki Kuninobu finds out that the proctor of the game raped his surrogate mother after she protested Yoshitoki and Shuya Nanahara's inclusion in the game. For the crime of trying to avenge his mom, Kuninobu is killed. This is true in both the novel and the manga. But in the novel, Kuninobu's just really pissed that this guy raped his fucking mother. But the manga didn't seem to think that that was enough reason for him to be so upset. I mean, come on, it's just his mom, right? So they decided to make him romantically interested in his own mother. So yeah, this is fucking stupid and gross. I don't know why it's in here. And again, she was also Shuya's surrogate mother, so that's doubly disgusting for him. So he basically blocks that out of his brain and pretends that Nobu's crush was Noriko so that he has something to do with himself from this point on. In the novel, Shuya defending Noriko out of respect for his friend was a serviceable motivation. In the manga, he basically has no fucking reason to do so and is only doing it to assist his own psyche. There is no justifiable reason for this change to Nobu's character, it just hurts the narrative. In the novel, Mitsuko Soma is a very damaged individual forced to mature at an age that is unreasonable for her due to circumstances outside of her control. She is a highly competent individual despite this, and a person who will do whatever it takes to survive. In the manga, Mitsuko Soma is a deranged lunatic who kills a boy before realizing that she truly loved him all along, and then has sex with him while he's bleeding out, shouting about how much she loves him when they met mere hours ago. She is highly sexualized in nearly every panel she shows up, thereby defeating any point that this story could have made about the damage sexualizing children can cause. Points that were already made in the novel's rendition of this character. In the novel, Hiroki Sugimura finally finds Kayoko Kotohiki after spending the entire length of the story looking for her, only for Kayoko to shoot first and ask questions later. She finds out he loved her in his dying breaths as he's trying to convince her to go find Shogo Kawada so that she can get off the island. Kayoko is left to cradle the body of a man who tried to save her life, a man she just murdered in cold blood. Distracted by the guilt she is racked with over what she has done, Kayoko Kotohiki is shot by Mitsuko Soma and dies. The manga spends 12 entire chapters covering the whole duration of Kayoko Kotohiki and Hiroki Sugimura meeting each other, getting to know one another, spending a long time falling in love with each other over the course of, I don't know, maybe an hour in the story's actual timeline, before Kazuo Kiriyama springs out of the woodwork to kill them both. The ensuing fight takes up at least a third of that runtime, during which Hiroki Sugimura discovers the secret to ki blasting, a technique he was once vaguely turned into the direction of by his master. Pretty much the last hurdle of his entire martial arts career, and something he's been struggling with for years, only for Kazuo Kiriyama to do the exact same thing after seeing it done once, only to never use it again for the rest of the manga! Know that these are just the bits I hated the most about a manga that added way too much to a story that I already thought was pretty damn good. I do not know if these changes were made by Takami himself looking back on his book and not liking it that much, or if they were made by his illustrator, or if their publisher made them add in a Dragon Ball fight because that's what's sold. And of course you need to make the sexual assault victim sexy. I mean, that's just common sense. Why would she be assaulted if she's not hot? Regardless of the reason, this manga is easily the worst version of a story that spawned my favorite genre of action anime. And unfortunately, if I had to pick an adaptation that this genre picked out for inspiration, it would probably be this one. Just based on the fact that there are likely more mangaka that got started by reading action manga than there are mangaka that got started by reading dystopian fiction. People are generally inspired by the mediums and genres in which they create things. That's kinda just the world that we live in. I hope that some of these people were inspired by the novel, but considering the lack of nuance in a lot of Battle Royale stories, I kinda doubt it, but even the manga doesn't really have the same vibe that most Battle Royale has today. It's got the stupid down cold, but the action is just kinda bland? Like, the illustrator clearly had a lot of fun doing the viscera, but if that Hiroki Sugimura fight was any indication, the action is a little difficult to follow, and it's just not that fun to look at. And the reverse is true of the film adaptation. The action is done wonderfully, but it's not stupid enough to be called trash viewing. Obviously the novel doesn't have the idiot factor, so what gives? How did any Battle Royale story that followed become good enough as to be engaging, but dumb enough as to be trashy? Our answer lies in the sequel to the film adaptation, Battle Royale 2: Requiem. This film is a roller coaster and a half, some of the dumbest, campiest action schlock I've ever seen in my life. But even being that, it still makes a decent point here and there. Somebody clearly had something to say with this film, and just as clearly didn't know how to say it with a straight face. And there are few things more Battle Royale than that. It's just a shame that it's not a Battle Royale story. What? Yeah, the death game here has nothing to do with kids being forced to kill each other. In fact, they're encouraged to work together. It's not really a game so much as it is conscripted service. It all starts the same way. A bunch of kids get drugged, fitted with explosive collars, given supplies and weapons, and sent out to kill somebody. But they're being forced to hunt a terrorist cell known as Wild 7, led by Shuya Nanahara. This is in response to said cell declaring war on the adults of the world, which is just the dumbest thing, and a perfect setup for a Battle Royale story. Rather than fight in their own war, the Japanese government decides, well, if you want to fight somebody, we'll send more kids to fight you. That's the new Battle Royale procedure. Rather than having all kids in the same class kill each other off, they just send them off to fight the terrorists. I mean, it's no less fucked up than what they were already doing, I guess, but where's the game? Are there restricted zones, randomized weaponry, special rules? The answers are only once, no, and kind of, respectively. They don't bring up the presence of restricted zones when going over the rules of the game, but somebody does die because of it during the film, so clearly they're still active. Every player is given the same body armor and an assault rifle with ammo, plus supply drops later on in the mission. This is a level of supply unheard of in the original Battle Royale, which is weird. We'll get to it. The one special addition is that every student is paired with the opposite gendered student matching their number. So male student number 1 is paired with female student number 1, etc, etc. If the other member of your pair dies, then your collar explodes. This gives them all a reason to keep each other alive, because apparently being classmates for more than a year isn't enough reason for you to care about someone's life. This whole scenario feels bizarre on every level. There are two benefits to sending these kids out to fight. The first is shock troops. Wild 7 is entirely based on the concept of protecting children from the adults, so if they're sending children out to fight Wild 7 is killing these kids. Which can be spun a billion different ways to get parents from your society hating Wild 7 even more because they just slaughtered a bunch of children. You tank Wild 7's morale and make them look even worse to society at large. The second purpose is to keep the Battle Royale tradition going so that you can keep juvenile crime at a minimum. Theoretically, in the fiction presented, this is a really intelligent move on Japan's part. It's almost literally killing two birds with one stone. But because they add the pairing system and make these collars detonate for any reason other than the kids are trying to run away, they wind up worsening the result of either of those two purposes. Anybody who performs even a cursory glance of investigative research on this battle or any battle that follows it will be able to tell that some of these deaths were caused by explosive collars, at which point they will know that this wasn't necessarily a kidnapping by Wild 7's part or some kind of assault on an island that nobody really thought about or cared about, but rather that this was an assault committed by the Japanese government using children as conscripted service. This isn't a country that's fine with the Battle Royale having existed at all, I suppose, and it's already being televised that they're being sent out like this. But that in and of itself is kind of a flaw in the system, because you could have used this to paint Wild 7 as the bad guys, and it really doesn't feel like they're doing that. Like, not even the terrorists are going to feel all too bad about killing these kids, because the kids would have died anyway. None of this is accounting for the expected outcome, the one that happens in this film, where the kids wind up being caught by Wild 7 and then freed of their explosive collars, so that neither of those two purposes actually come to fruition. And I know there are going to be people in the comments who are like, oh, the Japanese government doesn't give a shit about these kids. They don't give a shit about actually hurting Wild 7 in any meaningful way. They just want to send a message to other children and to other terrorist groups. But they went to the trouble of giving these kids body armor and assault rifles. That shit's expensive. The proctor of the game has this whole speech about how expensive it is for them to raise these kids in the first place, and then they spend more money just to have the kids die anyway? Like, what's the point of that? Why not just give them the day bags from the first game? Make it more interesting for anybody watching the show. They could have so easily had their cake and eaten it too if they just cut the media coverage and cut the whole collars exploding when somebody else dies bit. So the way that all of this was actually done makes my brain hurt. The characters don't make it much better. At first it seems like we're gonna have a really cool main character in the form of the daughter of that first proctor in the first Battle Royale film. You know, the kid that was kind of abusive and roasting him over the phone? Her name is Shiori Kitano, and ever since Shuya Nanahara killed her father in the first game, she has been training for 3 years to take Shuya out. Whether this is out of guilt for how she treated her father, or just a kind of pride on her own part, is never really stated, but it still makes for an interesting character. Those are things I want to know about. That alone makes her more fascinating than most of the characters in the cast. She is so prepared to take down Shuya, she signs up for the Battle Royale just to get combat experience. And that's before she knew that the Battle Royale had ever been changed. She was willing to risk like a 95% chance at death just to be a little bit better at killing Shuya. And man, when I thought our protagonist was gonna be this sorta stocky teenage girl, I was fucking here for it. I wanted to learn more about her complex feelings for her father in the film. Too bad our actual focus character is a more generic version of Shuya Nanahara himself. His name is Takuma Aoi, and he's got a little bit more of a delinquent vibe than Shuya did, but that doesn't really do much of anything to make him an interesting character. He wants out of high school, he hates this fucked up game, he cares about his friends. This is the Battle Royale equivalent of wearing a white collar button up to a boardroom meeting when, bro, the dress code's not that strict. His love interest is another generic character named Nao Asakura, whose qualities include being a rugby manager and liking Takuma Aoi. This is kind of the biggest flaw with number 2. The latter half of it spends a lot of time on characters we have no reason to care about. And then there's the proctor of the game, Riki Takeuchi, who bounces all across the map between genuinely interesting character that I really want to talk about, and whoa, this guy's crazy! He introduces himself to us by listing every nation the United States had bombed by the time this film was released as a means of saying that equality is a lie. His theatrics in that scene are wonderful. This is exactly the kind of whack job you want in a battle royale. He's also shown to have this habit of chewing mints that's used in a later scene to give him this fucked up smile where there's just like 50 mints in his mouth. It's great, I love it. But then we get to see him talking to the Japanese Prime Minister, and he starts insulting the guy using the same rhetoric that Wild 7 does, talking about adults like he's not one. Which is when it's revealed that the only reason he's a proctor for this game at all is because he too has had an explosive collar placed around his neck. Which I guess is meant to say that he's being forced to do this against his will, but I don't believe that this guy is being forced to do anything. I think he's having fun being crazy and killing kids. If you want him to be an intelligent figure who's on the kid's side and dies giving them a heroic speech, then do that. If you want him to be an evil mastermind in charge of the game that's making these kids suffer, then do that. You can't have both. That doesn't make sense. And speaking of doesn't make sense, Shuya's behavior in this film is weird. Like, he's the leader of this terrorist organization, right? So why is he sitting at the top of his tower, closed off from the rest of the battle, while his people are the ones doing all the fighting? Staring solemnly at the floor while his compound is being stormed. For being the guy who told the world to go fuck itself a year ago, he still seems like the same kid who really doesn't want to be here right now. Which would work if there was another leader and Shuya was just the figurehead, but that's not what's going on here. I don't know what's going on here. which means that this Battle Royale film that contains no Battle Royale successfully captures the spirit of a Battle Royale. Any logical explanation for any of the shit that goes down in this film is full of holes large enough to run a train through. We're here to watch a bunch of kids struggle and suffer and be pretty badass. Applying reason to any of that is just gonna make the experience less enjoyable, which will result in the intended message of the film being lost in a sea of uncertainty. And damn if it's not a message that still holds up. The original Battle Royale film was a very pro-America piece of literature, bringing up the American Empire as one of the safest places for Shuya and Noriko to go to after the game has ended. It's a superpower that's against everything the Republic of Greater East Asia is doing, and it invented rock music, so you know it's cool. There's this undercurrent throughout the novel that all the most virtuous badasses deeply admire America. Battle Royale 2 disregards everything about this. It is anti-American imperialism from start to finish. The Prime Minister is so intimidated by the power of the United States that he refuses to even say their name in a negative tone. Whereas both the proctor of the program and the leader of Wild 7 list the nations the United States has attacked, provoked, or otherwise in real life at different points in this film. Genuine footage of war-torn Afghanistan is used in this film to illustrate that the US doesn't just harm terrorists and vaguely define threats with its actions. Those actions impact the lives of the average citizen. There are monuments to the dead throughout Central America listing thousands upon thousands of names, all of these people having died either through direct or indirect action by the United States. Regardless of how wacky Battle Royale 2 gets, it does get this point right. And this film was released on July 5th, 2003. Less than 2 years after 9/11. It was way ahead of its time, and yet it couldn't have picked a better time to come out in aims to change the world. And the scariest part is, it almost didn't come out. The director of the first Battle Royale film, Kinji Fukusaku, worked on the second until his death in January 2003, leaving his son Kenta to finish the project. It's possible some of the awkwardness in this film is just Kenta trying to fill the holes in the story his father left behind. It's also just as possible that Kinji made some weird decisions though. The first film wasn't exactly spotless. Either way, the idea that the late Kinji Fukusaku was so inspired by the tragedy of the original Battle Royale that he not only chose to adapt it to film, but also to continue it with an extra film talking about the things that he felt were tragic about the world and the ways that he wanted the world to change, only for him to die while trying to make that continuation is itself a tragedy. And because of that, it adds a lot more meaning and depth to the work. To this day, Battle Royale continues to provide genuinely interesting takes on really difficult subject matter, even while it's wrapped up in a bunch of juvenile angst and gratuitous violence. And while it is unfortunate that interesting characters like Shiori Kitano are left to die with little to no fanfare, their only narrative purpose being to further humanize an already dead male character, and it's equally unfortunate that to this day no visual narrative based in Battle Royale has crafted an interesting female character that is self-actualized with motivations beyond their love interest, not to mention the myriad of other problems the genre is facing in the current day, which is causing it to be left by the wayside in turn. There is still no better trash viewing, at least for me. Because buried underneath all the slop you could gobble up, there is genuine art to be found here. Like the stunning cinematography of a garbage dating show, the narrative of a good, bad Battle Royale is the sort of thing that you just can't look away from. Which means that even the stuff that I turn my brain off to still needs to give me something to think about in order for me to enjoy it. No wonder I am the way that I am. Hi guys! So before I start with the usual end card, I want to bring attention to the Stop Killing Games initiative. I don't know if you've heard about it, but basically this is an initiative that was made with the intention to stop online games from ever becoming like fully unplayable. It's meant to put pressure on companies to make just one person per company do like 2 hours of work on the game shutdown in order to release source code, put the game in a point at a place where people can reasonably repair it, because right now, with most online games, when they die, it is physically impossible to repair them. Like, you cannot keep the game you bought. Consumer law is very iffy on all of this, so most of this initiative is just trying to get this topic in front of a court system so that they can actually talk about it. Unfortunately, it's very well trodden in the US, but in the European Union, it has barely been touched at all. So if you happen to live in a nation that is part of the EU, you can sign a petition just to put this in front of the courts, just to get them to look at it and see where they decide it should lie. Kind of off topic, but this is something I really care about, so I wanted to bring it front and center. On to the usual end card bit, though. If you like this video, you know what to do. There's a like button down below. If you have some kind of constructive criticism, this video was a huge experiment on my part, so I would love to hear from you in the comments down below as well. Or if you just like Battle Royales and were like, hey, there's a Battle Royale that wasn't covered here, or whatever, feel free to talk about that. I just love talking to people. I love hearing about media. If you want to see more videos like this, or more videos like the ones that I've posted previously, feel free to check out my backlog if that sounds interesting. Feel free to subscribe to see any new videos that I release in the future. And if you are a fucking goat like Goliath, who has been a supporter of this channel for well over a year now, can I get a fucking booyah? Like, god damn, bro, you are so cool. If you want to join my Patreon, there's a link for that in the description as well. There are 3 separate tiers, but really the $1 tier is all you need to get bonus content that I mentioned previously in the video. I'm relatively active on a few other sites, including Twitch and Blue Sky, so if you're interested in seeing what I've got going on there are links to those, I believe, in my channel bio, but I'll put them down in the description as well. And overall, just thank you so much for watching the video. It's such a great feeling to be able to vomit a bunch of words in front of a screen and have people actually care or like be interested in what I have to say. It's aces. So thank you for giving me that opportunity, and especially if you made it to the end of this card, it really means a lot. Thank you. Take it easy. I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.